Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's licensing subcommittee. We'll just do the very formal bit at the start so we can sort of get into the meeting proper. So, first of all, we need to elect the chairman of the meeting. Do we have anyone that might want to propose?
Propose Councillor Monks.
That's convenient. I'm sat in the right chair. That's proposed a second. Thank you. So we'll move to introduction. So first of all, my name is Craig Monks. I'm councillor from Bedminster Ward in West Dorset. I'll just ask my two colleagues to introduce themselves. I'll start with Kate.
Councillor Kate Weller. And Councillor Jill Haynes.
Thank you, councillors. And I'd like to ask the officers and other members to introduce themselves. We'll start to the left and we'll work our way around to the right.
I'm Laura Autry from Legal Services.
Roy Keepax, Senior Licensing Officer and author of the report.
I'm Kirsty Gatehouse, Licensing Officer for Dorset Police, covering the Weymouth and Portland area.
I'm Ellie Turner, I'm an Elections Democratic Apprentice doing the hybrid.
John Miles, Democratic Services. I'll be taking the minutes for the meeting.
Thank you all. I think we should have more microphones so we can all have one each instead of having to pass them around. And I'd like the representatives to introduce themselves who wish to speak today, please.
Good afternoon, committee. I'm Phil Watts. I'm primarily a planning and development consultant, but frequently get involved in licensing matters where there's some pertinent planning issues in the background, as there is here, which we can obviously go on to discuss. I'm also, which is material, I think, to the site of the premises, a member of the Weymouth Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group in a voluntary capacity. So I clearly have a great understanding of the different characteristics of the various neighbourhoods that and communities which obviously comprise Weymouth, and a lot of the background statistics in terms of demographics, characteristics of the area in terms of home ownership relative to types of residential accommodation, which all give a broad brush picture to the type of people that are represented within each communities. It's also pertinent to say that I'm a long-standing a long-standing resident of Lodmore Hill, the specific area in which the premises are sited, having resided in Colton Road South, just round the corner, for some 24 years as of this month, so I know the area well. Indeed. And sorry, shall I introduce my colleague? I'll just take the opportunity to introduce the applicant, Mr. Bayraktar, Sami Bayraktar, his father and his brother who's here for support. And we've also got Miss Garnett, who works at the neighbouring post office and coincidentally actually resides next door but one to the premises. She's here to speak in support of the application.
I was just going to say, on the point of speaking, thank you very much for that. And obviously you've done this before because you remembered to turn the microphone on and off. So for people that wish to speak today, it's a bit of a challenge, even for councillors that have been here for a while, but if we could just remember to turn the microphone on and then off afterwards, that'd be wonderful. So thank you very much. We will go into some procedural items very quickly. So first of all, do we have any apologies, please?
Apologies for absence were received from Councillor Sarah Williams and Cathy Logg, substituted by Councillors Jill Haynes and Kate Weller. Thank you.
Thank you. And do either of my colleagues here have any declarations of interest to declare? None? Thank you. And do we have any urgent business? I believe we don't. Thank you. So the next stage is for the senior case officer to present the case, and just very quickly to explain the format of the meeting. This is your opportunity to provide any information that you think is relevant to the application you've submitted, and for other members to ask questions. So broadly, what we're going to do is the case officer will present the case, and then either side can ask any questions of him. We'll then ask the applicant and the agent to give any remarks, and for other parties to ask questions of you. We then go to the right of the room where the Dorset Police will do the same, and you can ask some questions of them, and then we'll sum up by going back the way we've just come across the room. So we'll sum up, and sum up. So we'll hand over to the case officer, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This is a hearing to consider an application from Mahir Bayraktar, is that right? Sorry. For a variation of a premises licence at the Seaside Pizza and Kebabs, 113A, Dorchester Road, Weymouth. The Licensing Act sets out Section 4 that the authority must carry out its licensing functions with a view to promoting the licensing objectives, and they are the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, the protection of children from harm, and public safety. The application is to vary the licence to have late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Monday to Sunday, 12 till 0500 hours, supply of alcohol on and off the premises, Monday to Sunday, 12 till 0500 hours. Dorset Police requested 23 conditions to be added to the licence if it were to be granted, which the applicant has agreed to some of. The conditions agreed to can be found at pages 1 to 3 of Appendix 3. Dorset Police also requested a terminal hour of all activities to cease at 2 o'clock, which the applicant agreed to, also found at Appendix 3. So with the amended times, if the variation is to be granted, then the licence will have late night refreshment, indoors and outdoors, Monday to Sunday, 12 till 2, 0200. Supply of alcohol on and off the premises, Monday to Sunday, 12 till 0200 hours. There were no other representations received from the other responsible authorities, environmental health, planning, etc. However, planning did make a comment regarding a planning concern, and this can be found at Appendix 4. There was one relevant representation received from a member of the public relating to the licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder and prevention of public nuisance, mainly being noise in the early hours of the morning and litter, and this representation can be found at Appendix 5. Some of the comments from the interested party contain matters which are material considerations under planning but do not relate to the 4 licensing objectives. This would include any parts of the representations relating to the highway. There was also one comment from Weymouth Town Council who were waiting for further information regarding the ways the applicant will be promoting the 4 licensing objectives, and this can be found at Appendix 5. But since then, Weymouth Town Council have withdrawn their letter following the clarification received. This withdrawal was submitted as supplementary information. Section 7 of the report sets out the options that are available to the subcommittee after they have considered all the information contained in the report, the written representations, and anything that is said at this hearing. Finally, I just want to draw your attention to part of paragraph 9.44 from the guidance as quoted in paragraph 6.4 of the report. It is imperative that the authority ensures that the factors which form the basis of its determination are limited to consideration of the promotion of the objectives and nothing outside those parameters. The licensing authority is expected to come to its determination based on an assessment of the evidence on both the risks and benefits, either for or against making the determination. And that's me.
Thank you for that. Are there any brief questions, queries, or clarifications for the officer? Are we happy? Thank you. In which case, we will move over to the applicant submission. So I've got listed 2 speakers. I note that you mentioned at the beginning that there's possibly 3. Was that a shake? So we'll accept that your presence here is enough. In which case, I'd like to pass over to you.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Just on that point as an aid of clarification, Ms. Garner did actually submit a representation early on at the end of June, and I'm not sure that has been made available to the committee. If I may just share this with Mr. Kippax. Yeah. Now, what I was going to say in respect of that point alone, if members did not have the benefit of that representation, given that it was submitted in due time, I would respectfully ask that that would be made available to you. And if need be, Ms. Garner given the opportunity to make any representations in relation to that.
No, that's fine. We'll make sure that's circulated. Yeah, and so don't worry. We'll accept your written. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Chair. Now, in moving on to the salient points of the application, to be fair, at this juncture, I probably don't have much to add. I think Mr. Keepax has adequately explained the salient points of the fact that this application is essentially twofold. One is to seek to renew the impending premises licence, which is due to expire in October, but in hand with that to also add the provision of the sale of alcoholic beverages for both takeaways from the premises and for deliveries alongside substantial meals in terms of both issues. And it's also fair to say that since the application was submitted, as Mr. Keepax quite rightly relayed to you, the applicant has indicated his willingness to seek a 2 a.m. Closure for takeaways, rowing back from the originally requested 5 a.m. And just to continue with deliveries for 1 hour after closing time to 3 a.m. It's worthwhile noting that on that basis, the premises do currently trade up until 2 a.m. on Fridays to Saturdays and until 1 a.m. on Sundays till Thursdays. At this juncture, I don't think I've got anything further to add to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. And would you like to speak as well? That's fine. Sort of double check, make sure you don't want to lose an opportunity. In which case, are there any questions from my colleagues or officers? I think we've got one here.
I can only apologise. I have now found the statement from it's being sent to all your emails shortly, and I'll send it so you can see that it's been sent to them as well. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions from my colleagues? Did you have a clarity?
Yeah.
You're sat next to me, aren't you? So we're sharing.
We're sharing, yeah. Thank you very much. Could you just clarify what I've got in the report isn't quite what you've just said about what the existing trading hours are, I don't think. So your current trading hours, according to the licence it says in the report, are 11 are until midnight, Sunday to Thursday, and Friday and Saturday until 1 a.m. Now, potentially you've obviously can deliver for an hour later than that, but that's not what you've just said. So could you just clarify what you think you're trading in at the moment?
Yeah, I'm happy.
Just to confirm, obviously I have the licence in front of me. It does say Sunday to Thursday, 2300 till midnight, and Friday and Saturday, 2300 to 0100.
Would you like to add anything to that?
All I'll add is that there is clearly a breach that obviously needs to be regularised, and hopefully this committee hearing will afford the applicant the opportunity to address that.
On that note, Dorset, please, would you like to ask any questions or comment?
I haven't got any questions at this time, thank you.
In which case, you can keep your microphone on, because I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. I don't prepare to elaborate much more on the supplementary information that was sent out this week, partly because I have a slightly croaky voice, so apologies if my voice cuts out or if you can't hear me very well. But the bit I just wanted to sort of clarify and reiterate based on what I'd submitted was around the fact that we're not completely anti the idea of this variation going ahead at all, nor the sale of the alcohol. Our main concerns are the lack of acceptance of the conditions around what alcohol can be sold and how that can be sold. I've worked in this role for 3.5 years now. I've been a staff member of Dorset Police for 8. 7 of those I've worked in Weymouth, and the alcohol-related antisocial behaviour that is experienced in the town is one of the biggest issues that officers deal with on a daily basis. And although it's concentrated around the town centre, and this premises is obviously not right in the town centre, it's still within a walkable distance. And obviously the late night antisocial behaviour is one part of this, but to go from midday as well, we have to still apply those concerns around what alcohol might be purchased. So with the conditions that I proposed through speaking to the applicant back in July when I did, and the follow-up emails around the restrictions of what could be sold for delivery only, that was to try and mitigate the issues that we have with especially the street drinking community within the town, because especially around sort of the super strength beers, lagers and ciders, which was why I proposed the condition of nothing above 5.5%, and the maximum amount of alcohol required available, with a delivery. This is to stop people from just being able to wander in and purchase whatever they'd like. When I spoke to the applicants, their attitude was very much, people want alcohol, we want to deliver it to them. There's a time and a place for that, but initially, when this was submitted and at the start of our conversation, it seemed like people, when they get their kebab at the end of the night, might still want a drink to take home with them. So why they'd still be wanting large quantities of alcohol to take back with them, I'm slightly unsure around. And the conditions that we've proposed aren't unique to this premises. As I've mentioned in the report that I submitted, the restriction on the ABV level on alcohol is something that we apply to everything that is off-sales related, that's applied for or varied in the town. And I've dealt with several recently, I say recently, within the time I've done this role over the last 3 years, and it's something that's been in place for a little bit longer. I know that there's been mentions of other places in the town that can sell much stronger, much larger quantities till much later in the day. However, these are older licenses that were granted a very long time ago that don't adhere necessarily as well as we'd like to meeting the licensing objectives and the stricter conditions that we try and apply to licenses nowadays. I'm sure that you're all aware, but for clarification, when a premises license is granted, it's granted indefinitely unless the premises license holder chooses to vary that license themselves, or it's brought to review by either us or a member of the public. Anyone can, for you as the committee to then decide what goes on. So the older licenses, we don't easily get to step in and do something. There has to be sort of a proven track as to why we can't do that. And there are premises in Weymouth that we are currently looking at and that are pending reviews. I'm aware of one that's going ahead, and there are a couple that are very nearly being applied for because they can't meet the conditions like I've proposed, which is what we'd expect people to be adhering to nowadays. So that's sort of where we stand on it, and I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone else has. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one question, and I'll briefly explain the premise so you can understand where my question is coming from. So as a committee, or subcommittee, we will determine the application, and we need to be able to fulfil 4 key elements of the application as part of the Licensing Act. And 2 parts of, well, 3 of those 4 is the prevention of crime and disorder, the prevention of public nuisance, public safety, and the 3rd is the protection of children from harm. So with that in mind, the 2 questions that I had was, and I think you briefly touched on it, but I also note the point you made around the volume of alcohol served. I think you kind of covered that already. And in line with those 4 objectives, I can understand why you've highlighted that. And the second question for me is the conditions that you proposed. As a committee, as a subcommittee, when we apply conditions, we want to make sure they're conditions that can be followed. Otherwise, we're essentially setting up applicants for failure. Are you, with the suggestions you've made on the conditions, do you feel that they, A, should fulfil the objectives that we need to meet, and are they achievable?
Very valid questions. So, like I say, these aren't unique conditions that I've just pulled out of my head from nowhere for no real reason. They're conditions that we do have, and I'm not in a position to list specific premises right now, but there are multiple off-licence, off-sales premises that have very similar conditions in Weymouth and across the county. As a team that I work in, we cover all of Dorset. And although some of us work with Dorset Council, some of us work with BCP Council, we work to the same standards. And the conditions that are on here are also in conditions on premises in Bournemouth. So it's not something that's unique to Weymouth. It's something that we try and look for across the whole county. And I think that they're quite fair, given the nature of the business. It's not a shop, it's a takeaway. And if people are purely just wanting to have one or two more at the end of the night, I think that the conditions that we've proposed with the maximum of 4 cans of beer, the smaller volumes of spirits and things like that, would be substantial for what they're doing, and would, obviously there's still always the potential that alcohol could lead to antisocial behaviour, but in smaller quantities the likelihood is less. So that's why I believe that they are reasonable, and like I say, they have been applied to other similar businesses across the whole county.
Thank you. Any questions from colleagues? Kate, please.
Just a couple of small points for clarity, because there's so much paperwork in here, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that it's it's excessive. It's really good and it's comprehensive, and I think it's been a good application from that point of view. But just for clarity, we're suggesting that this is not an off license. If people go in to buy alcohol, it is only if they're ordering a meal to take away as well. That's right, yes? Thank you. And the other thing, there's a note somewhere about eating indoor or outdoor. There is no sitting out license here, is there? So it is purely for if they collect on site and take it home. That one can't stop the meetings; they go down the street clearly, but there isn't a sitting out license, is there? No. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to that, one of the conditions that we proposed was for delivery only. So apologies if that wasn't clear. And that's what we were hoping for, because again, to encourage people to be able to walk in between the hours of 1200 up until 0200 could still give sort of way to the street drinking community sort of during the day as well as in the evenings and at night. So that's just, sorry, just to clarify that bit. It wasn't just takeaways, it's delivery only. Okay.
Yes, I find it quite hard to understand how there is control on the delivery of this, because it says it should be to a premise, so the delivery is to a premise. But in various places in Weymouth, you can have a bench outside a premise. You don't necessarily live there. And so that is something that concerns me a little bit. The other thing is, the person doing the delivery presumably has to decide that they're delivering to people of an appropriate age to have alcohol. And if you've got a load of 17-year-olds who've put in the delivery, I can't see that the person with the takeaway is going to argue the toss about handing over the delivery. So I find that the conditions that you've put are a little ambiguous, because it seems to me quite difficult to police, actually.
Just before you answer that, I'm conscious that you're making notes. I'll come back to you and give you the opportunity to respond to these points too. Please.
Thank you. So in the initial conditions that I proposed to the applicant, the deliveries are to a bona fide address only. It can't just be a bench in the park. And in terms of the refusal, if they're not old enough when they get there, that's where the Challenge 25 age verification policy comes in. And it was the applicant themselves that proposed to me that they would supply their delivery drivers with body-worn video cameras that would be activated at every delivery to verify what was going on. Obviously, it isn't the easiest thing to police. As the police, I think I can say that. However, that trust is with every single premises licence that we grant, that people are doing what they do, and should it be found out that they are not, then that's when we take action, and that's when we seek to review what has already been granted. So hopefully that clarifies those points for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a similar concern, which is where the premise of my question came from, but I think we've sort of covered that to this stage. But I'm going to come across to the applicants. Do you have any questions of the police, or would you like to add any clarity or any comments to what you've heard so far? You can speak as much as you like. I'll welcome it.
I'll wrap any questions up, if I may, as part of my address. Thank you.
Thank you. So in that case, just looking around the room, is there any other questions from democratic or legal officers at all? Any further from my colleagues, or are we move into summing up, in which case you have the floor again.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I have anything further to add. Like I say, it's just that as Dorset Police, our main concern is around the lack of restrictions that the applicants are willing to accept. It's not as if they've gone with one of them but not another. All the ones that relate to the quantities and the volume, the alcoholic volume of the products being sold, are the ones that the applicant hasn't been willing to take on board, and that is a main concern for us, that they don't appreciate the levels of crime and disorder that occur within the town as a result of alcohol. And yeah, it's a concern for us, but I think that's all I've like to add to that, so thank you.
Thank you. I'd invite you to sum up from your perspective, and I'd be particularly interested to hear any comments that you'd like to add with regards to the concerns of the police within that, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's going to be a pertinent point here. If we may, though, just start with the conditions, just to clarify that largely in terms of the limit, in terms of the amount of alcoholic beverages, the strength and all the rest of it, I like to think that I have convinced my client of the sensible approach in rowing back on any of his demands on that point. Wherever he does remain concerned is on the stipulation specifically to wine. The restriction that is sought is one 375 millilitre half bottle of wine, which he quite rightly reminds me is very difficult to source. You're looking at either 275 ml, the sort of the large glass size bottles, or a 70 centilitre bottle. He would also be reluctant to accept a restriction specifically to a 375 ml bottle of wine, because in many respects that's nonsensical for, say, a couple wishing to have to either share a pizza or, have, 2 kebabs each, so we would ask for some movement on that. We're not talking litre bottles of wine here. We are literally talking a standard 70 ml bottle. Now, obviously, if there was need to impose an alcohol restriction on that, in terms of percentage ABV, then that's obviously another way that we could regularise the size of bottle of wine. But short of that, no, he's very accepting on the restrictions in terms of no more than 4 cans of beer, lager or cider, or 4 cans of a pre-mixed cocktail or spirit per person per order, that would be more than acceptable. So that really just leaves me to the two other conditions which are currently in dispute. And they're actually the second and third on the list. The first condition that's in dispute, sorry, no, they're not. They're actually the first two conditions on the list. Though the first condition that's in dispute, or certainly being questioned, is that alcohol shall only be sold and supplied via delivery and must be ancillary to a takeaway meal. Certainly the second part of that condition is more than acceptable to my client. He is happy, you know, as was quite rightly said, there's no aspiration to trade as an off-licence. This will just be alcohol sold with specifically with a meal of the volumes suggested. But where my client is concerned is that he does wish the opportunity to be able to sell alcohol with takeaways between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. We are conscious, after all, that people at those hours can still go into the Royal Oak Public House opposite, which has permitted licensing law hours until 1:30 at least on a Monday to Thursday, and 3:30 a.m. on Fridays, Saturdays and Sundays. People can still walk into the Royal Oak Public House at those times. They can buy an unrestricted amount of alcohol without purchasing even a packet of peanuts. You know, so it does. So there are certain protections afforded by the applicant in the context of his business. So we would ask you to reconsider that requirement to allow him to allow alcohol to be served with a substantial takeaway meal for, as I say, for takeaway as well as for delivery. The second questionable condition is the one that says no alcohol will be displayed or available for purchase within the shop. Certainly, he's more than happy that alcohol should be kept away from the public servery area and even out of sight. But where that condition is queried is on the second part of it, where it refers to available for purchase within the shop, which again, for the reason that the first condition is contested, he would respectfully ask that, you know, alcohol could be available to purchase within the shop for takeaway purposes along with a substantial meal. If you're okay for me to now move on from the salient points, whilst it's fair to say that I actually, you know, have a clear amount of respect for the police. And sorry for their colleagues who have had to deal with all the trauma around the country over the last few days. But I am concerned in this instance that there does seem to be a lack of understanding as to the most likely nature in which this particular premises in this particular location will operate. There is concern from the police perspective that the takeaway offering alcohol will be attractive to those people that have been kicked out or have left late night drinking venues in the town centre. But I think that this is absurd. Surely people leaving pubs and nightclubs at 2, 3, 4, or even 5 o'clock in the morning from the town centre, if they're hungry, they will go to a nearby kebab house in the town centre. They are not going to walk all the way from Rendezvous at Town Bridge, through town, along the Esplanade, up Dorchester Road, to specifically go to Seaside Kebab, a good 1.4 miles from Rendezvous, for instance. The clientele that is largely going to be catered for is people that live within the Lodmore Hill area. Those people that are more likely to be having a quiet night in on a Friday or Saturday night, watching a Netflix movie, get to 12:30 at night and think, you know, let's go and get a kebab, let's go and have a bottle of wine. You know, it's the weekend, you know, we've got the weekend off because effectively that's the demographic. You've got people that generally have jobs in the Lodmore Hill area, different demographic to other areas which have been mentioned in a comparison, such as Abbotsbury Road area, Littlemore, and Melcombe Regis and the Park District. So it's very much a different social class, dare I say it, of people living in the surrounding area. And as I say, it is going to be people that more come out from their home address wanting late night refreshment than people that are going to walk all the way from town, passing a number of kebab shops, pizza areas such as Surfside, Istanbul, Weymouth Kebab House, just to then suddenly decide 1.3 miles into their journey that they're going to have a kebab. It's also not, although it's a main road, it's also not a main thoroughfare from town. You know, people either walk along the Esplanade, going towards Greenhill or even Preston, or walk through Radipole Gardens, up Radipole Lane, if they're going towards the north of the Weymouth area. Very few people pass up Dorchester Road, through Lodmore Hill. It's also very much the case that a large amount of the clientele, as is already experienced by the applicant, just with his basic takeaway offering, comes from people staying in nearby hotels, guest houses, and Airbnbs, of which there is a myriad of in that town centre location. Many of those will be frequented by holidaymakers who, you know, don't need to get up for work at sort of 7 a.m. in the morning. They're more likely to be up to the small hours, quite arguably wishing late night refreshments because they're on holiday. So there's an appeal there in terms of, as I say, the clientele. As I say, it's also a mistake to judge Lodmore Hill in the same way as places like Abbotsbury Road and Littlemore, because, as I say, you know, there's greater transient population in those areas, people with less responsibility in terms of home ownership, more bedsit type accommodation, more people on benefits. So again, that's an important characteristic. I'm extremely concerned about the comments that this outlet could serve street drinkers, almost for similar reasons. Why would a street drinker that frequents the station forecourt or Western Bridge, or indeed the seafront shelters, choose to walk to Lodmore Hill when they could quite easily, and more easily, go to Istanbul Kebab Shop on King Street, which is one of those premises which does benefit from a legacy licence, which is open till 5 a.m. for takeaways, and which is also selling unrestricted amounts in terms of volume and physical numbers of drinks. You know, that's where the street drinkers will go. And furthermore, even if there generally aren't street drinkers in the Lodmore Hill area, I know, because I've, you know, at times, especially this time of year when it's warm, left the house at 5 a.m. to walk the dogs. I have two routes. One either takes me round Lodmore Hill, where I see very little in the way of any, not even problem drinkers, but, you know, alcohol-fueled youths going home. Whereas to walk with the dogs at 5 a.m. through Radipole Gardens is a very different situation, where you see people congregating on benches, both youths in their 20s, as well as, you know, people that probably don't benefit from a home address. So I do think it's very wrong and arguably naive to be looking at imposing exactly the same restrictions on takeaway, which admittedly is not a million miles away from the town centre, but certainly not within the town centre area. I also think it's material that if the same restriction should be applied to these premises here, a question mark needs to be asked as to why the special protection area is drawn to exclude this area, because surely that is in itself a case in point that there aren't the same problems in terms of crime and disorder in this location as there are elsewhere in the town. So I think on that basis, that concludes my response. I am obviously willing to answer any questions though. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So next I shall ask our officer to... Oh, you've summed up, haven't you? Or do you have any questions?
I do have questions, which is why that would have been useful in the opportunity to ask questions rather than leaving it to the summing up where technically I don't think I'm supposed to get questions or the chance to anything else. So just to clarify a couple of the points that they made, if that's possible. Sorry.
Sorry. I'm just going to say, unless my colleagues sort of differ with my view, I agree with what you've just said, but just to make it clear for the process, I'm happy if everyone else is happy for you to ask those questions, because I want to make sure that everybody gets a fair hearing and opportunity. But you are right, earlier in the meeting would have been a better time, but if everyone's happy with that, please carry on.
Sorry, thank you. Like I say, it's mainly just to clarify a couple of things that have been said. So the point made about the Royal Oak still being open and people being able to buy an infinite amount of alcohol from there, that's a staffed premises where people would be drinking on the premises, where staff would be able to monitor the levels of consumption. Off sales is always trickier in terms of making sure that people haven't overdrank to cause issues, things like that. In a pub, we'd like to think that they're going to be taking those steps to stop people when they've had enough to drink. We've seen that from the Royal Oak previously and many other places around town. The confusion around the half bottle of wine, I think, again, we encourage drinking in moderation. Yes, I know plenty of people that will drink an entire bottle of wine or two or more to themselves. However, half a bottle of wine per person, if you go out for a meal and there's food included, wine included, then it's normally based on half a bottle of wine per person. If you're at a wedding and you're trying to work out how much alcohol to put on the tables, you normally go by half a bottle of wine per person. If they're not available in that quantity and it's maybe slightly less than that rather, obviously that's the maximum amount. I'm not saying that it has to be a 375ml bottle. If you can source 275ml, 250 millilitres, which I believe is a large glass of wine, then by all means go with those ones instead. But again, this should be sort of for a personal consumption with a meal, as per what we've requested. The comments around lots of people coming from the town late at night, we have 4 late night premises left in Weymouth now. It's not what it was several years ago. And yes, there are still places that stay open late, but it's not that there's the draw that there once was, where there's many, many places that people regularly stay out until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Most premises in the town centre do now close by 2 o'clock. And that's what we're finding that shift in. There was a comment made about people in these Airbnbs, things like that, maybe wanting something. So my query would really be, if it's not just about getting the takeaway on the way home, why is there an issue to restrict just alcohol with a delivery, if that's kind of what's being gone for? And people are lazy nowadays. People order takeaways that they could quite easily walk to and get, but it's the habit, Just Eat, Deliveroo, things like that. People are just ordering on their phone to get it delivered. They don't want to be going out. In terms of the comparisons to different areas of Weymouth, Lodmore Hill is on the edge of the Park District, which I believe is one of the most socially deprived areas in the country, not just in Dorset. And there's a social housing complex literally a stone's throw from where this premises is. And as I say, I've worked in Weymouth for 7 years. Previously, I was a police community support officer. That was one of the areas that I covered, and there were numerous visits that I had to conduct to people in social housing setups that were unemployed and things like this that weren't out working. I'm not saying that's the only demographic, but it's not as if this is the most affluent area of Weymouth to stick a takeaway either. You mentioned the restrictions on shops and how they don't have any, and with the street drinkers and things like that. Some of the premises that the street drinkers are frequenting are the ones that we're in the process of reviewing. They will be losing those opportunities to potentially losing them, sorry, I can't say definitely what will happen, but they're potentially losing the opportunity to buy it. If they want that alcohol, they're alcohol dependent, they will be going wherever they can. The bigger places such as Asda, things like that, they've got security. They don't want the trouble. They're going to be deterring it. Places like Istanbul, I'm not aware of the street drinkers currently frequenting there. That's a fair comment. However, they're going to start looking for other premises to go to. They may go there, but if Istanbul turn them away, they're going to be looking for somewhere else. It's not an unreasonable walk for them. They've not got jobs to go to. They're just looking for their next drink. And I think the only other bit that I wanted to add was this now could set a precedent for other takeaway shops that are in the area. I think I mentioned it already in the information that I submitted, but that's the reason that we're trying to get these restrictions put on this premises so that other premises can follow, and this can be that gold standard benchmark that we use for anything else that might be applied for in the future.
Thank you for that. I've gone slightly away from agenda to give you the opportunity to make those points. I'm going to slightly stay on that same theme in the interest of fairness and come back to Mr. Watts should you have any further comments to make. I'd just ask in the interest of time if you can try and be, I don't know what the expression is. Succinct with them, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of points really. I think again there seems to be this confusion about how society operates, you know, and almost what we're trying to achieve. You know, there's talk about people in social housing and you know street drinkers and things. You know, these people don't have vast amounts of disposable disposable income. Yes, they might have a fix for alcohol. They might have, you know, other addiction problems. The last thing an alcoholic is going to want to do is to waste, you know, 18, 20 quid on a pizza or even a tenner on a kebab just to be able to get a drink. There's other ways to get a drink, you know, without, you know, sort of having to, you know, spend money on a meal. And as I say, you know, we're not talking about an off licence here. You know, we're not talking about there being a risk of street drinkers, you know, stealing from the premises because there will be no alcohol accessible from the public areas. So I'm really concerned that we seem to be over-egging the risk here. There's talk about the review of other premises. I think as a resident of this town, that is commendable. But until such time as that review happens, surely we shouldn't use the prospects of that review to judge the outcome of what is very much a different kettle of fish here. If indeed there are issues in the future in relation to Seaside Kebab, then that premises would be open to exactly the same review as those problem places in the town centre and the special protection area that have already been alluded to. I also think that there's a bit of a naivety here that, as I say, we need to very much establish the link that alcohol will only be sold with takeaway meals. And generally, those people that are picking up takeaway meals with alcohol will walk to their home address to consume it. There is no way that you can physically walk with a kebab in one hand, you know, 3 cans of a 4-pack in the other, and still be drinking, you know, a 4th can on the street. That's ludicrous. You know, people that are tanked up in town will more likely get a cab home, you know, probably having got a kebab in town. They will not be walking, and they'll certainly not be walking through the streets with a can of Carling that they've purchased from Seaside Kebab House. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to leave it there because I think we run the risk of kind of going over old ground and sort of turn and throwing. So in that case, I'm going to move to Mr. Keepax to sum up his case, please.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, there's been a lot of comments regarding what other premises has and hasn't got. It's only a reminder to the committee of 1.17 of the Section 182 guidance, which says each application must be considered on its own merit and in accordance with the licensing authority's statement of licensing policy. So it's just something to consider. There has been a lot of comments about what other places have. We're not here to discuss them, and that can't be part of your decision process. So every application has to be treated on its own merits. Other than that, that's it from me.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move to the conclusion of the meeting. So before we do that, I think I'm going to preempt my question by assuming that everyone feels that they have had their say, because we've put nearly an hour into this discussion. So if we are happy with that, I would just like to check with our legal advisor if they have any relevant points they wish to address.
I think everything's been covered, Chair. Thank you.
If my colleagues are both happy? Happy? In which case, we will look to close this meeting. So, but there's no exempt business. So in which case we shall come to closing the meeting, or closing the public part of the meeting in any case to conclude. So the subcommittee will consider the decision in private with our democratic and legal officers in attendance and the legal advisor who we may call upon for some advice and guidance in coming to our decision. The decision of the licensing subcommittee will be emailed to all parties and made available on the Council's website as soon as practicable and within the prescribed 5 working days limit. There is a right of appeal against the decision of the licensing authority within 21 days of the date of the notification of the decision, and in this case the appeal will be heard at, I believe, Weymouth Magistrates Court. So there's nothing else from anyone else. I shall close the meeting there. Thank you very much.